Welcome back to Season 2 of Beyond the Stars with Tim and Jeff.
Welcome to Mysteries, Laughing Shadows, Twisted Beams. JeffMara and Tim Tactical, yes it's real, yes it's real.
Tim, it's Season 2 and it's great to have you back again.
It is Season 2 of Beyond the Stars with Tim and Jeff, and I freaking love that. Thank you so much for making it possible.
Tim, you have a new species of ETs to talk about today, and they are yellow in color. How did you hook up with these?
Well, this is one of the experiences that I had fully in private. So basically something outside of any program, outside of anything of that. It just comes from the fact that once people tap into certain experiences, they keep repeating. So my story is in the German Black Forest. I was there with a bunch of friends. We had this really interesting wooden cottage that we rented for a week or so. People were in the back of the house in the kitchen, and they were, partying, getting drunk, loud music. And I was, taking the time off, going inside of the living room when something very unexpected happened. I was inside of that living room, taking some time to, answer some texts on that good old school BlackBerry kind of device. And the house had these wooden walls and these large windows, old ancient large windows, looking outside into the dark forest. And at one point when I was just standing there, completely on my own, texting, and these weird cold white lights appeared from the outside, like a stroke type of light that just came out from the outside and turned the whole room into shadows and light beams. So every single object was like throwing these intense shadows. It's not really. It's needless to say that was kind of off in the middle of like 3 a.m. in the morning, where everything should be like completely calm and dark. So that was happening, and I immediately, there was something that was drawing me to that light. So it wasn't scary in that moment. It was just like very unusual, very odd, and very weird to look at. And it was repetitive. It kept going from the outside. It shone right into the living room of that cottage, and it turned everything into that white light. So something gave me that impression that it almost felt like communication in a way. I don't know. It's like something that came up in my mind that felt like the lights are artificial and there's some type of communication behind that. And it's odd nonetheless. And I wanted to know what it is. So basically, it was coming right from the front door that was on the left side. And what can I say? I was opening that door, and in the very moment when I opened that door, I was looking into that dark black forest in Germany. Barely couldn't see, the trees and the plants and so on. Clear sky, night sky, and the whole flickering, this stroke kind of light became a constant cold light. And there were two beings standing about 23 feet, like 7 meters away from the door frame. And I was standing and looking at these huge beings.
You're saying that they were huge. How tall were they?
I'm pretty large, but they were, I would say, above 7 feet. And especially not only like they were large, but they were bulky, like really massive beings. They did have, I could see that they have a yellowish skin from afar, bulky, big arms, and a really interestingly formed head, because it had this appendix to it. And the interesting thing is that I looked at that, and in these situations, usually you would feel some type of fear or some type of anxiety. I was quite calm in that moment because the way they positioned themselves was really, really interesting. It wasn't that they were standing, like in one of those movies where you open the door and they're just standing in front of you in the door frame. That wasn't the case. They were standing quite far away in the middle of this pathway that led to the house. And they were completely still standing there. And for everyone who's new to that, so with my background and some of the stuff that I've experienced, it is a very common protocol in these advanced programs that you would just stand very still, almost that the other person can get adjusted and used to your presence in the room. So I immediately thought like, oh, they're not aggressive. They're not opposing any threat. They were just very, very calmly standing there and so far away that it's like it gives like not the feeling of an emergency. Nonetheless, it was like an intense situation, very much because I was basically alone. Friends were in the kitchen, and then there's like opening the door to the Black Forest in Germany, dark night, and there was this weird artificial cool light and two yellow beings standing in that pathway.
I assume you haven't encountered them previously while working in the governance sector.
I had no idea, and that's a fascinating part of that story because, well, first of all, not everyone in the government in all these advanced programs has knowledge about every single species. Because spoiler alert, it's 2025. We should know that there is way more species and way more biodiversity in the universe than anyone with files and archives could ever keep up with. There's so many different types of forms of life in the universe. But no, I've never encountered these beings, never heard about them. Later on, I learned more about that, but we're going to get there in the story. The thing is that I saw them standing there. They were super calm, very bulky. The face was looking kind of humanoid. It was a humanoid type of face, two eyes, a mouth. The only thing was there was completely no body hair at their body whatsoever. They had almost a shimmering light, like the skin was smooth and was shimmering in the stroboscope. This weird artificial light was like shimmering on their skin. Yellow skin, which is a very rare and unusual kind of skin color. And then they had this big type of appendix that was like sticking out from their head, and that was going backwards. And the interesting thing to me, that was one of my first thought, is like they looked absolutely the same, to me at least. Both of these characters had the exact same height, the exact same outfit. They were wearing like a type of garnish, a type of orange type of fabric that looked unusual. It was like almost like a fabric that, in medieval times, or someone would have like knotted together. So it was like not a polyester type of fabric or something. It was like a really like one of these old school fabrics. And the faces and the appearance, like absolutely identical beings standing there.
Were they bright yellow, like a lemon?
Oh, that's an interesting question. They were more like the tone of a giraffe in that kind of area, but the skin was super smooth, like almost like a squishy type of look. Like if you could this memory foam where you can press it in and it's like going back. That was the impression that the skin was giving me. And later on, I learned a lot about that genetics when I flew to the US, and I talked to some other people who are in the fields, and they gave me some more information on them. But in that very moment, I was standing in the door frame, I was looking out, I saw these two beings, and to my surprise, after a while, which is the usual protocol in these advanced programs, whenever we, for example, met with some of the Greys, It was basically both sides sitting in the room, and everyone takes as long as their nervous system needs to calm down and to approach each other. The background why this is being done is that, and we figured that out in the 1990s, each and every body is giving out certain vibrations. You might know that, and people out, at home might know that whenever you're with someone who's like feeling good, then you feel really nice and calm in that area, or in that space. So these vibrations can differ extremely from being to being. There are some beings that just feel so exotic that it's a lot for the human nervous system to take in. I think that is one of the answers to one of the most asked questions that I get all the time. Like, hey Tim, why don't they, appear just in front of people? One of the reasons, besides bacteria and space germs and all of that, is just the nervous system. The nervous system of humans, they have a certain range of what they can actually take in. And everything that's beyond that range would be very, very aggressive and very disturbing for the nervous system, can even, cause severe damage and breakdowns. So one of the protocols in these advanced programs, whenever meeting such a being, is being extremely still and giving both sides all the time they need. Don't make any rapid movements, don't make any movements at all if possible, and just give each other, almost like two dogs that was like sniffing at each other before they even know who they are. So that was the situation. I immediately picked up on that. So it's a sign of like a friendly protocol that I understood as that. And I was super surprised when after some time, maybe a minute or maybe a little bit more of that, one of them was talking to me, and one of them was speaking absolutely fluent German, which was something I would absolutely not expect in that situation.
Now, when you say it was speaking to you, was it telepathically or verbally with their mouth?
It was completely verbally. I was standing there about 23 feet away, and they were speaking to me across the hallway. And even though there was like loud music in the background, that's kind of coming from the kitchen, I could understand them, and they were talking to me in the most pure German that is possible. There was not a single accent in that, so it was not. I couldn't tell that, they were basically fluent speakers in German without any accent, and it was super surprising for me in that moment. And the question that they actually asked me was fairly straightforward, was, can we approach you?
I hope you said yes.
I said yes with a but, because I said, if you're for my, I translated would be like something, if you're good for my well-being, then yes. The thing that I'm quite aware, and that sometimes gives me or gave me, certain tensions in that situation, is that a lot of the species out there have like some type of dominance play, which is usually coming, when two people from certain species or certain people meet with each other. There's always some type of tension, like checking each other. Something that people probably know from like male locker rooms, right? That type of attitude. That's something that is that certain species in the universe do these things. And I used to find myself in situations where some of these groups where you have to, you got to be your man in that moment to hold that kind of eye contact, that standoff in a way. So there's always like this type of tension when these scenarios occur, and even though it was kind of a rare situation, I've usually do not always run into ET beings, but that was a very, very special one. And the way it was, like they asked me like, "Hey, can we approach you?" In perfect German. It was so calm. It was respectful, and it was very, very kind of neutral, friendly approach. And there was something within me that was immediately thinking like, okay, if when you are for my own well-being, then yes, you can. So in that moment, they came a little further, closer to me, and they conveyed a message to me that was, at that time, very, very surprising.
Well, don't stop there. What was the message?
Building tensions here. Well, the message was very interesting because in that time I was basically still working in the programs. For everyone who's new to Beyond the Stars, my background is governance, so I used to work in some of the covert governance fields, where we investigated and looked into some of the situations, the exopolitics, some of the situations going on with the planet. So in that situation, it was kind of unheard of for me, and that they came over to me and told me that they said, we know what you're gonna do. And I didn't know what I'm gonna do in that moment. I was just the guy who was like 3 minutes before that encounter. I was standing with my, my Nokia or BlackBerry or whatever I had at that time. I was standing in the living room, and I was, not expecting any type of visitation. And suddenly I had that conversation with two beings that were standing in front of me, extremely bulky, yellow eyes, and a huge appendix to their head. And they were telling me, we do know that at one point you're going to do something, you go to the world, you're going to tell some of the stories. We want you to know that you're extremely protected. And we also want you to know that we protect you. And that was I felt that very much in that moment, even though it was like kind of an outlook to what we are doing with All Shift Happily Now, right now, with the All Shift Happily Now community. At that time, you got to know, Jeff, I was in between in these sessions. I came from the gray session. I had my session with Being Six, which was beautiful. I just learned about the Earth shift. I learned that the planet was going through a shifting phase where everything, the whole reality field would change, something that is occurring right now on the planet. And people see that. A lot of people see, the news, they see what's happening in the media, they see that there are UFOs. We openly talk about these realities now. We have this conversation now on the JeffMara podcast. Things that were not possible years ago and in that moment were not possible at all. I just came out of that situation, and the frustration, and I got to tell you, the frustration was huge in that moment, because I basically suggested a plan of how we could prepare the population for what's going on with the planet, what's going on with the reality, what's going on with the UFO disclosure. And I basically was heavily rebuked from the official sites. They were saying like, hey, that's not what we're gonna do. And there was I was in that phase at that moment where I was like kind of frustrated, because I thought like, hey, if we are not the ones who go out there, because these advanced programs collected all the information and connected, all the dots. If we're not the ones to get out there and tell people, who's gonna do that? But apparently in that situation, there was no interest in that. There was no budget available for doing it. And I found myself, kind of questioning the whole thing. Found myself, going to parties with my friends, and that was kind of the situation. So hearing and meeting in this very interesting situation, being with two beings that I've never seen, I've never heard about their civilization. They felt immediately like beings that have a strong military. That's what I felt, because the presence, the way they chose, and you got to know at these levels, ET beings often tingle with their own genetics, right? It's not anymore like a situation where genetics just occur naturally. It is something where genetics are actively chosen, so that they are bulky and have these, huge arms. That's a choice. In most cases, that's a choice. Just as much as when you see a bodybuilder, that's a choice too. He didn't come out like that. He wasn't born with that. He chose for it. So it was kind of surprising for me to learn that there's like these beings that seem to have like a strong military and have this presence of a strong military, but I've never ever heard about them. It was an enigma. I've never seen. We all know that the Greys, right? We've all heard thousands of stories of people being abducted or like contacted by the Greys. Maybe there are people outside, watching Beyond the Stars right now who had contact with the Greys. We do know that there are different other beings. We have like the pop cultures talking about the Pleiades a lot, and we do know that there are reptilian type of beings and so on, but I've never seen a yellow humanoid face. And the face looked like a human face, very smooth though, like almost like a wax face or something. But standing there, and they were telling me like, hey, there's a one point where you're gonna go outside and you're going to you're going, well, you're coming forward basically. And we want you to know that we're there, we're watching you, we've been watching you. But the interesting thing for me was I've never heard from them, and I've never seen them again after that time.
Did you have to report this incident to your superior officer?
Wow, I've never heard that question before. No, well, I did not talk about that. I probably should have done that, but in that phase, I was already kind of frustrated with the whole setup and everything, because some of the information that I learned from these advanced programs were basically that the whole planet every 12,000 to 15,000 years is going through a heavy change, a heavy modulation of energies, realities change. Something that we read in the Bibles and some of the ancient texts where we talk about the biblical flood and such. These things are cyclically happening to the planet, and the whole organization was not willing to actually provide the information and do the preparation work that, in my eyes, was needed in order to prepare the population. Usually every single civilization out there is given about 15,000 years to prepare for a shift in consciousness, a shift in reality. And then here we are on planet Earth. Basically, at that time, it was like maybe 15 years to go, and still not a single clue. People were living on the planet at that time, having no idea that they are surrounded by life forms, that there are different levels of life forms, that there's horizontal life forms that we share the same reality with, which, there are ETs, but there's also there's also vertical life forms, beings that are far more exotic, that can just, zoom in and out of realities and talk to people and so on. So there was all this stuff going on. And in the news at that time, when people came forward and said like they had this experience, people would not listen. And that was odd. So it was highly frustrating for me. And no, I did not report that situation. It was also in the way that it was brought forward to me, the way the situation, the whole conversation only lasted about 2 minutes. But it was so secretive in a way. And so, like openly speaking about like, hey, we know what you do. We are here for you, even though you don't see us. And yeah, that was the only time that I saw them. And the only time that I even came into contact with any of these yellow beings. But later on, I learned some more of that.
Is it possible that you have an alien implant or you're electronically tagged somehow? Because how did these ETs become aware of you?
Good question again, Jeff. Yeah, it's very likely that I do have a chip that is quite a common thing, actually. There's like quite a number of people on this planet currently that do have these chips, and they are basically like Apple Watches in a way, because they connect so what we know about chips is that when they get implanted at certain body parts, certain body areas, they connect to the neural system and the energy system of the body. So they get basically energy from the battery that the body gets energy from too. And they connect directly to certain species. And 90% of all the chips are actually pretty benevolent, because there are just, connections to other beings out there. And these other beings have an interest to know where you are, how your body is doing, how your health is doing, and so on and so on. So it's very likely, especially for someone who's like being in contact with exotic life forms, it's very, very likely that there's like a chip being used. But it's also a very common thing amongst people who've been contacted by ETs. In probably all situations, ETs would infuse a chip. And it's not even against people's will, because again, 90%, about, about 90% of all these chips, pretty benevolent. The only reason why they're given is just because there's another species caring for you, another species that wants to know where you are, and wants to be able to monitor some of your mental and your bodily functions.
Is it common for ETs to show up and communicate with you outside of work?
Kind of rare, to be very honest, Jeff. The situation is such that the planet itself has certain protocols, certain rules. I know it seems a lot like a rogue kind of thing that happens, but especially because the media is like portraying like, what are these UFOs? We do officially have no idea about them, and officially everyone is puzzled and confused. But these encounters are happening on a systematic level for more than 80 years. And in these times, there are certain rules and certain protocols that have been established. So just as much as there, in general, should not be intruders in countries, and there are certain visa situations and certain borders and so on, there are also these types of rules for like exotic life forms entering the planet too, especially because the risk for certain things like panic, being seen, in getting too much involved, overstepping certain borders, space bacteria, as we've talked about these things, that's pretty real. There is, however, a slight chance, as always with borders, that people just overstep certain barriers and just get into situations. That's happening too. These things happen too.
Is there a lot of UFO activity happening in the Black Forest?
Apparently there is. Yeah, there are certain hotspots around the planet where there's more UFO activity than in other places. That has something to do with the way that the energy streams on the planet are working. So what we got to know is the planet itself has two magnetic poles, right? A North Pole, a South Pole. So there are certain lines of energy that just move around the planet. Which, for example, cause for the auroras and things like that. So we can measure these things. So in certain places around the world, there's just more UFO activity because it's easier for them to enter these places. You got to imagine them being like electromagnetic bubbles in a way, just as much as the planet is an electromagnetic bubble, and we are electromagnetic bubbles. You got to find some overlapping frequencies so that it kind of matches in, and then they can come into these places. So yeah, there is apparently some UFO activity in the Black Forest.
Speaking of bubbles, is the Earth surrounded by some sort of energetic field that people may call the firmament?
So what the Earth is surrounded by, the interesting thing is that the whole universe in this version of the universe is actually a dualistic version, and it's based upon sunlight. So it's based upon photons. The qualities of sunlight is it's behaving like particles, but also like a liquid. So usually sunlight would spread out everywhere. You can't just have light in a room and the light being dark. That's not possible. So the shadows that we actually perceive in the world, they come from objects. The Earth itself is kind of in its own bubble, and it's surrounded by the infinity of the universe. So the pictures that we do see with NASA and so on, where it's like this dark vacuum that is around the you know, supposedly being the universe, that's not the full picture of the universe. It's actually the way that everything inside of the planet is creating the energetic reality field, and what's outside of that defies the rules of what's happening with planet Earth. So yeah, needless to say that getting out of the reality field of planet Earth and going into what's beyond that is kind of challenging. And if you want to learn more about that, we do have a Beyond the Stars episode on the moon.
So these yellow beings told you that they've been watching you and they're looking out after you. Is there anything else that they relayed to you?
Yeah, for me, it was really interesting because at that point, again, I was in that frustrated state where I thought like, you know, kind of like, you know, being bound to something and these programs would not give the information to the public that I would love to see in the world. And they basically said that, you know, they already knew that I'm going to do something like All Shift Happily Now, which is basically years later, I received this message where someone in the field said to me like, hey, I think you should watch Gaia. And in Gaia, they had this, you know, cosmic disclosure episode where some stuff was released, and I was watching that, and I thought like, oh my goodness, this seems to be like the sign that I was waiting for to come forward. It is about time to bring these things now to the table. And I clearly would have never done that if I would have not the conversation with these beings that were basically, you know, kind of preparing me for that moment. They were basically saying like, hey, we know what you're going to do in a few years, even though I did not know in that moment. So it was like kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way, but it also was like really reassuring. So I basically reached out to Gaia in that moment. They took quite some time to investigate my story and to look into that. And once they were convinced and had enough evidence, and I gave some stuff to them, we recorded the first seasons of Cosmic Disclosure together and talked about some of the, you know, some of the stuff that I did in the programs and some of the background information. Now, the interesting thing to me was I didn't know if you know, I wasn't expecting this to balloon up in so many hundreds of shows. And there's so much more to speak about. It's just beautiful. And that very moment, I thought like, if there's one thing that I can give to people right now, I do have the chance to talk to people about all this knowledge that I've acquired and all this necessity of changing one's own reality and their perspective, how reality actually works. If there's only one thing that I can give to them, it's like, go into meditation, sit there, and, you know, just 4 words, say, all shift happily now. And then imagine that the reality field shifts smoothly, shifts happily. Because what's happening actually with the planet and the cycles that I was talking about is that the planet itself is not stagnant anymore. It's not in a linear reality anymore. It approaches an infinitive ocean of realities. And that brings in all these other beings, which is just one of many, many symptoms of this earth shift. In reality will change. And that, again, we're talking about the nervous system, that can be weird for some people. It can be a lot for people to take in that there are other beings, that there are even like beings that are way beyond in their intelligence than, you know, what humans could do. Because, you know, humans have this tendency to assume that they're like the most intelligent being in their environment. Now they're confronted with other beings. Already have an AI life form here, but there's also other life forms that are far beyond that. So basically, me being there with Gaia was like, yeah, in a way brought forward and secured by that situation that I have had with these beings. And again, it was just a conversation that lasted 2 minutes with these very exotic looking, very big, bulky, non-terrestrial beings. But I'm so grateful for what happened, and it was such a strong convincer and such a strong moment that really brought me forward on my on my mission, which I'm now doing with All Shift Happily Now.
Did these beings inform you of what they are called and where they come from?
They did not, and that's some of the interesting. Like that is something that interested me a long time, because of course after the encounter was done, again it lasted only like 2 minutes or so. It was fairly quick. They said their goodbyes. They went out of out into the Black Forest, and the cold bluish light disappeared. It was calm again, except for the bouncing bass that came from the kitchen. And a few moments later, I was standing with my friends again, who were like talking to me, and I was like still in that puzzled, dazzled state of like trying to integrate what just happened. And when I was back in when I had access to the computer and the files and the internal network and such, not all files are accessible, right? There's like there's a lot of information in these computers, but not everyone gets every information. That's even more extreme in other programs. But I was trying to figure out what that was, who they are, and what is it about. And I've never found anything. I've never found any trace of them. I try to look into like conventional UFO, like the internet at that time. No one talked about like giraffe-colored yellow beings with an appendix. No one was talking about that. So one of the reasons for me, lately I've seen some stuff. I've seen on Instagram basically a virtual artist who's doing CGI animations of ETs and doing like comics with them. And he had a situation that I found really interesting because it showed exactly that being, kind of like looked 80-90% like it, and then a gray, and they were sitting together at the table. And I thought like, wow, that's an interesting coincidence for my story in a way. But one of the reasons that motivated me to go to the US, go to Gaia, have talks with Gaia, and also meet with people outside of Gaia who were military personnel and were in the fields, to acquire some information on who those beings were. And I was actually lucky and successful with that because I did meet some people in the US, several people, and some of them had information on these beings. So I was actually learning that apparently the US has knowledge of them, knows that they're about 2,000 years ahead and advanced to regular human, or like Earth right now. So they are 2,000 years beyond what Earth is capable of right now. And that was kind of interesting. A strong military, as I thought they have, because they appeared very bulky. And apparently something that I learned, that it was given to me as an information, is that they have a lot of genetics coming from mollusks, which is kind of rare, I guess. A lot of people that have encounters with ET beings, usually those are mostly, lizards, or they are like sometimes bird beings or so. But who has an encounter with a mollusk being? Well, I guess I had. So and it made so much sense because the thickness of the skin, the smoothness of the skin made a lot of sense. I learned something else from some other sources where they were telling me that they had quite an interesting social system as well. They were telling me that they basically have this one intelligent life form that is spreading a lot of information into each individual. So each individual has their own identity, their own character, but they all receive some of the information coming from like almost like a queen or a king, even though I'm not 100% sure about the gender of that being, but it definitely spreads the information into these other beings, which is apparently, I guess, one of the reasons why they looked so alike, because to me, they were identical twins. They felt differently, they felt like almost like when we're meeting human twins, they can look quite similar, but they have different characters. And that's what I felt with these beings, even though, it only lasted a few minutes. But I was picking up on that. But they looked, to my perception, 100% identical. And apparently that is something that the species has in common.
Tim, is the organization that you used to work for anything like what we see in the movies of the Men in Black?
Well, the Man in Black used to be a real program that was done in the 50s, which didn't turn out so well. So one of the reasons why we even have a movie called Man in Black is because sometimes movies are being sprinkled into the public perception. And when you now Google Man in Black, instead of getting some released files that were declassified, you will get 250 Google pages all about, Will Smith, the rap song, the movie, and the sequels, and so on. That's a kind of a typical technique to do these things. Since I know the background of what that program was like, that program had nothing to do with the group that I was associated with. However, if you look into the movie and you see how it's portrayed there, the movie has nothing to do with the reality of that program, to be very honest. Again, the program is something that was developed in the 1950s. It's done, but the movie itself portrays this as like this suit-wearing ET agency that I think they're living underground or something. There are some parallels. These groups that I used to work for, there is a lot of activity and a lot of facilities that are underground. They don't look like the movies. It's not like all this white, shiny, futuristic kind of aesthetic. It is more like like an industrial facility, something like that. It's more like that. And you do not have, I've seen some clips from that movie, and you have all these aliens running around, really, that's not how it is. There are clear protocols to who can come in, when does someone come in, and so on. It is almost insane how much protocols and how much administration in those programs is.
You mentioned earlier that Gaia Network or Gaia TV had to investigate you before having you on their programs. So what would they do? I mean, it's not like they could just call the governance sector and ask them questions about you, could they?
Well, that you might think that they can't, but uh, there's people that have government backgrounds and that came to Gaia and did the interviews, and certain people, like for example the producer Sid Goldberg is very well known in the whole field, and he has a lot of contacts. So yeah, there was background checks going on. I can't actually go into the details. I was also sending them some documents and so on. Something that I would usually not do for the public. Why would I not do that for the public? Because I'm still in that in-between phase where I'm freely giving out a lot of information, not all of the information, but a lot of information. And there's always like a realm of possibly able to deny that reality, and everyone can decide for themselves. I do think that I earn a lot of trust and did a lot for that, and also like the information that I'm giving out is like very beneficial for a lot of people, especially what we do with All Shift Happily Now and building a community where we like influence the reality field. But ultimately, yes, Gaia did some background checks because they did have some bad experiences with it in the past.
I want to let everybody know that Tim's going to be answering some of the comments in the next episode. So be sure to type your questions below.
Yes, I would love that, actually. So everyone, we have this beautiful watch party on every Saturday. And also, if you want to see more of me, I'm on YouTube, Tim Tactical. I'm on Instagram, tim.tactics. Also, allshifthappily.now.com if you want to become part of a beautiful effort in changing the reality field happily. It can be done. We all have to connect our psychic abilities, and then beautiful things can happen. And you find a lot of information on allshifthappily.now.com how to connect with this community. So thank you so much for watching that. And we're all excited to see you next Saturday beyond the stars.
Welcome to Mysteries, Laughing Shadows, Twisted Thieves. JeffMara and Tim Tactical, yes it's real, yes it's real.